Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Well, good morning and welcome to conference, colleagues. May I add my thanks to this year's conference sponsors. Your support of the work local government does for children and adult social care is greatly appreciated. In previous speeches, I've said that 2019 is a year of interesting anniversaries. It marks the 30th anniversary of two important breakthroughs in children's rights legislation: the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Children Act 1989. Central to these documents was the idea that children's wishes and feelings must be paramount when making decisions that affect them. Local authorities have taken these child-centric principles to heart in all that they do. There's been precious little evidence of that from our national politicians in their quest to achieve Brexit. And now we have another general election. Many promises will be made, including looking again at the welfare reforms that have created levels of cumulative distress in families that I have never seen before in a public service career that spans 4 decades. What a shame ministers are not here. Today is World Children's Day, and it would be great to extract a commitment from politicians on behalf of the nation's 12 million children and young people. The very first thing that I would want from them would be a commitment to tackling the current shameful levels of child poverty. 1 in 3 of our children are living in poverty. It's 2019. There are over 4 million children living in poverty, and the majority of those children live in a working household. It's simply unacceptable. Since the 4th of November, ADCS has been publishing short written reflections from former ADCS President reflecting on the 30th anniversaries of the Children Act 1989 and on the 15th anniversary of the Children Act 2004. On Friday, we'll publish the vignettes together in a collection reflecting on both of those very important acts of Parliament that put children front and centre. The potent combination of austerity, rising demand, fewer resources, and a government whose attention for almost 4 years has largely been focused elsewhere endangers the ambitions and intentions of that act. There's still much to do if we're to become a country that works for all children. And in this compelling context, the system leadership role of the Director of Children's Services to ensure a relentless focus on the lived experiences of children and to speak loudly for change has never been more important. Children and Young People Conference are our present as well as our future. They deserve our support now. In September, we heard the outcome of the 1-year spending review, and it was frankly better than anticipated, with children's and adult social care showing an additional investment of £1 billion between them. And of course, £1 billion is a drop in the ocean for children's services, let alone for adults. If there's anybody in the Treasury listening, thank you for recognising our pressures, but this does not mean job done. We are still waiting for a long-term funding settlement. I don't just mean a 3 or even a 5-year comprehensive spending review. I'm talking about the need to invest sustainably, substantially and bravely in children's services. Investment that transcends parliamentary cycles and general election rhetoric. We must move away from the current piecemeal approach to funding. Small, ad hoc, short-term pots of funding from central government in response to single issues made available for some, but by no means for all local areas, are particularly unhelpful. Increasing pressures in children's and adult social care need to be funded properly, but not at the expense of other key local government services that help create prosperous, independent and resilient communities. These well-being and place-based services improve the lives of local people, helping them to live a good life, as well as prevent demand from growing exponentially in our social care services. And that's what we all want, isn't it? To live a good life. Local authorities can and do join up these services locally to deliver improved outcomes for communities, but we need the right long-term resources to continue doing this, not just a bigger slice of the pie. Conference, we need a bigger pie. Children's well-being is a signal of the overall health of public services and of society. Tomorrow, ADCS will launch a position paper on children's health and well-being. That paper describes children's health as being poorly served. There are some shocking failures to deliver timely health care linked to both demand, poverty, and the stresses of modern life, and service failure. And it's getting worse. We predict much worse. We need a health and well-being board approach at national level, a joined-up strategic response which ensures that preventative early health services that children need to help them on their way into healthier, happier adulthoods are commissioned and provided locally. Failure to act now will only store up trouble for the future. National politicians are not the only absentees from conference this week. Sir Simon Stevens is once again not able to join us. And I believe it's a real shame because I would dearly love to debate on this stage with him my premise and that of ADCS members that the health service is simply not doing well enough for children. Would I go as far as to say it's failing them? Yes, some of them. And certainly young people tell me this, particularly those young people in need of mental health support services. Too many CAMHS services stop at age 16 and adult mental health services start at age 18. That's tough luck if you're 17. Some CAMHS services are more enlightened, extending services to age 18 and even to 25 in response to both what young people are saying and evidence about adolescence extending beyond the teenage years. We need others to do this, and rapidly. As an aside, I was agog in the summer to learn from one of our members that a judicial review was being brought against a council by the BMA, seeking payment for the cost incurred by GPs in fulfilling their statutory obligations that arise from the Children Act 2004 in relation to the safeguarding of children. The costs incurred largely relate to attendance at meetings, preparing reports as part of the safeguarding processes for children. Conference, doesn't that tell you all you need to know about where vulnerable children sit in the priorities of health commissioners and providers? The ADCS position paper calls for a resetting of the role of health in relation to children and young people and the services provided to them. We must find ways of enforcing the requirements on the NHS services and commissioners to comply with what the legislation already requires of them, sharing information, spending budgets on children and young people as a specific population, send duties and responsibilities and their responsibilities to children in care. Wouldn't that be a terrific way to start a new decade? And here's something else that we really need to get right in the 2020s, inclusive schools. Currently, we seek to invest in what works. That's quite right. But how about investing in what matters? Like rewarding inclusive schools. I strongly believe that the government's education reforms have completely lost sight of inclusion. Let's not forget that state-funded schools are community assets. The new school inspection framework is shining a light on the use of formal and informal exclusions and will hopefully help to turn the tide on rising exclusions. It wouldn't be the first time that I'm about to make myself unpopular. but I think it's time to review head teachers' powers to exclude pupils unchecked. What I sincerely hope we're moving towards, albeit in painfully slow steps, is a school system that works for all pupils. Schools that do not exclude, that do not illegally offer all pupils. Schools that do not strong-arm parents to home educate. Schools that do not seek to engineer their intake before pupils are even on roll. Schools that value the richness that comes with educating children with SEND in mainstream settings, not seeking to hive them off to ever more specialist provision, or worse, into expensive, non-maintained special schools, the efficacy of whose offers are, to the best of my knowledge anyway, unevidenced. I've just mentioned home education. Yesterday, ADCS launched the outcomes of our 2019 elective home education survey. It shows that 78,800 children were known to be educated at some point during the 2018-19 academic year, which is a slight increase on the previous year. That's a lot of children. Over the past 5 years, the elective home education cohort has increased by an average of 20% each year. However, last year we saw a 14% increase from the year before. I want to talk now briefly about placements for children in care and the support we provide to our care leavers. The nature of the placement market for children in our care, particularly residential children's homes and independent fostering, is changing. It's changing in terms of quality and cost as well as availability. Private equity is driving some of these rapid changes in ownership, financial models, and service delivery. Although children's services, as you know, have long operated in a mixed economy with private, voluntary, charitable, and community providers involved in the delivery of services locally, the entry of private equity into the provision of fostering and residential care placements is a recent development, and it's a source of considerable worry for ADCS members. It's the level of profit being generated by some companies from the care of vulnerable children that turns my stomach. And it's difficult to reconcile this as austerity continues to bite in local government. However, it's the risk, the level of risk now apparent in the system that's my overriding concern. There's been a lot of media coverage about the use of unregulated placements for children in care, and some of the media narrative has been irresponsible. Children are not left languishing, alone, abandoned, without support in unregulated settings. Usually, these settings, which offer a degree of semi-independence, are used for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. Now, I'm no apologist for poor practice, and I know that a small number of children, younger children, have been placed in these unregulated settings as an absolute last resort. The use of unregulated and of unregistered placement settings is rising because of a lack of placement capacity in registered and regulated provision. Now, there's been a clear lack of appetite amongst successive governments to lead a joined-up response to help local authorities collectively to provide and commission flexible responses that can meet the most complex adolescent need. Many councils are investing in the recruitment and retention of in-house foster carers, but this is a big task and one that government could help with. But as the age profile of our children in care population changes, we will need different kinds of placements. What does foster care for a teenager look like? And what does the foster carer of the near future look like? Recent governments have rightly placed significant emphasis on better support for care leavers. Limited funding attached, of course, but nevertheless, it's an important signal. We have the Care Leavers Covenant. We have many organisations in the public, private and voluntary sectors offering guaranteed internships and apprenticeships to care leavers. That's all fantastic. But as one of my Barnsley care leavers said to me recently, Rachel, it's great that you use your national position to keep shining a spotlight on child and family poverty, but do you know how many of your care leavers live in poverty? I have to confess, at that moment, I didn't know, but I found out. And there's something we could all do to help. Currently, over 100 councils in England already exempt their care leavers from paying council tax until the age of 25. If your council hasn't made the decision, can I urge you as good corporate parents to give this some serious thought as you set your budgets locally? If every council in England was to do this, then care leavers who live out of borough or even out of region would not be disadvantaged by their postcode. And what of unaccompanied migrant children who become our care leavers? For the last 12 months, we've been in the position for the first time where we're supporting more UASC care leavers than UASC. We're now 3 years down the line since the Home Office began its review of funding rates for UASC, and still no outcome on the care leaver rate, which remains woefully inadequate at £200 a week. This lengthy prevarication by the Home Office is not, in my view, the action of a responsible corporate parent. Conference, it's time to draw my speech to a close. In the absence of a clear national vision for children's services, local government must be in the vanguard of developing and leading a bold vision for the future of children's services. I might be bold myself and suggest that one strand of that national vision must be to address demand pressures. The focus on efficiency and variation is frankly a distraction, and an asset-based approach to care and the reorientation of professional practice into a state that allows for the development of trusting relationships, that facilitates a preventative approach to working with children, young people and their families, must be prioritised instead. Colleagues, let me end where I began. Children and young people are our present as well as our future. They deserve our support now. Thank you, Conference.